The United States has a number of different ways that it can deliver nuclear weapons. In fact, people think we have a triad of nuclear weapons delivery, but we actually have a pentat. We have ballistic missiles on submarines. We also have ballistic missiles in the continental United States. We have strategic bombers, which can take off from the United States or elsewhere. They have both cruise missiles, which can deliver a standoff payload from several thousand miles away, but they also have air-dropped bombs that the bomber can penetrate and drop them over enemy territory. And then we also have short-range fighter-bomber aircraft like the F-16 or the F-35 that can deliver air-drop nuclear bombs. So we have 5 different ways of delivering payloads over a variety of targets, and those can reach from the United States anywhere around the globe, or they can be short-range systems in a tactical environment. The United States has 400 land-based ICBMs, the Minuteman III. Each of those has 1 warhead on top. We have 14 ballistic missile submarines, which has roughly 1,900 nuclear weapons deployed among them. We have, I believe, 60 strategic bombers, actually perhaps a few more than that, and they have an undefined number of nuclear weapons associated with them. Under arms control agreements, they each count as 1, but in fact they can deliver up to 20 nuclear weapons each. And then we have a small number of tactical nuclear weapons and fighter aircraft associated with them. They have to be specially wired, so these are called dual capable or nuclear capable aircraft, and we have a small number of those as well. And overall, the United States has about 4,000 nuclear weapons in its active stockpile. At any given time, roughly half of those are available for use by the president. Under President George W. Bush, the United States had a treaty called the Treaty of Moscow, which limited the United States and Russia to 2,200 to 1,700 nuclear weapons each. But that agreement had no verification provisions, and we relied largely on the old START agreement that was negotiated by Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev many years ago. So in 2010, President Obama and President Medvedev signed the new START agreement, and that limits each country to no more than 1,550 nuclear weapons deployed on no more than 700 strategic launch vehicles, ICBMs or submarine-launched ballistic missiles. And then each side is allowed an additional 100 non-deployed launchers as spares or backups that could be swapped in if necessary. And both countries are very close to meeting their obligations. The treaty's limits go into force in February of next year, 2018. Under President Obama, there was a new nuclear employment guidance document that was signed by the president. And in that document, he assigns 3 missions to U.S. nuclear weapons: to deter, to reassure, and if deterrence fails, to limit the damage that an enemy can do to the United States. So deterrence is being able to convince an adversary that any attack that they might launch on the United States or our allies will be met with such a negative consequence to outweigh any benefit that they might get from the attack. You can either deny the attacker what they seek, or you can punish them so that they don't think about actually conducting the attack. And you can do that with a relatively low number of nuclear weapons. Some groups in the United States say as low as 300. Some people think maybe a little bit more, but it's many fewer than we actually have. The second mission of reassurance is much more complicated because that is a psychological mission. How many nuclear weapons does it take for Europe to feel secure, for Poland to feel secure versus France, for South Korea to feel secure? And that really is a question of their relative strength and numbers. So if the United States today has 4,000 nuclear weapons, a rapid shift to 400 might undermine reassurance, even though it's still sufficient to deter an enemy. And so the reassurance number is really the main driver in the number of nuclear weapons that we have. The third mission is much more complicated, and I hesitate to use the term warfighting, but it really is a question of if deterrence fails and you do have a nuclear exchange, how many of the enemy's nuclear weapons can you eliminate with your own arsenal? Because every president would want to prevent an enemy from doing more damage to the United States and would like to reduce that. It makes a difference if you can make sure the enemy can't eliminate New York and Chicago and Atlanta and Los Angeles. Whichever city you would like to save would be better than it being destroyed. And so the damage limitation mission is really when you get into the military operations process that requires a certain number of nuclear weapons, but is not currently beyond what we have the ability to use. And in fact, the Pentagon has said that we can even reduce further below the current arsenal in order to achieve all three of those missions of deterrence, reassurance, and damage limitation. The last time the United States built up its nuclear arsenal was under Ronald Reagan. The 1980s was a major buildup for U.S. nuclear weapons. The current generation of Trident submarines, of B-2 bombers, of ICBMs were all built under President Reagan. They are now reaching somewhere toward 30 to 35 years of use, and they're beginning to wear out. And so they are going to need to be replaced if the U.S. is going to maintain its current arsenal. So President Obama began an effort to invest money in research and development and to put forward a program of record, as we call it, to eventually build these systems. That's going to be relatively expensive. Estimates are that it will cost at least $1 trillion over the next 30 years, but it's a relatively manageable percentage of the U.S. defense budget, somewhere between 3 and 5% per year. However, Donald Trump is reviewing now the modernization program. There is some thought that he may want to try and accelerate that or expand it. But regardless of whether he continues the old program or develops his own, I think given his rhetoric and his emphasis on nuclear weapons, whatever we build will likely be known as the Trump modernization plan. He's really going to own this modernization. And in the end, whether it is successful or not, it will be part of the legacy that he leaves.